today's session we will talk about adding filters to SSRS report. So in previous session we built a report where we added a search feature where user can enter some to year and we search for that report in the data and show the report for that particular value. But with having this search option, what happens, we are taking input from the user and user may not be knowing, for in this case we are taking input for calendar year, but the user may not be knowing how much data we have. That means user may not be knowing for which years we have the data. So user may enter 1999 assuming that there is data for 1999 and we don't show any data. Similarly, they may enter some year for which we don't have the data. So it basically creates a confusion to the user because the report doesn't render any data. So it basically doesn't convey the information that we don't have the data. Instead, user may be confused whether we have the data or if the report is not working on those things. So what if we can pre-populate this field with the year numbers that we have in the data. That means for the data we have for the years, we just pre-populate this particular field with all the years for which we have data. So if we can do that, user does not need to enter any value here. Instead, user will be just picking from the available list instead of entering a number and then seeing if there is a data for that particular value or not. So we pre-populate the value from the existing data so that user can pick one of the values. That way user doesn't need to worry whether we have the data or not, right. That basically guarantees that he is going to get the report, and it guarantees that user is running the report for the data we have in the system. So using filters are nothing but providing a drop down option. So when we use the filters, user will have the ability to pick the values from available list. So we will see how to create a filter. So for that exercise I want to create a new report. So this time when I am creating a new report, I don't want to use a reporting wizard. So in previous exercises, whenever we were creating a report, I used to select add new report, which opens the report wizard. So instead I want to create a blank report and then build the report from the scratch. So to do that, I will right click on the reports, click on add, and we will say new item, and then here you will see multiple options: report wizard, report, data source and data set. Report wizard, when we select report wizard, it will give us the options to go through the steps like we did earlier, like picking the table format or table type, matrix type, and then the step to layout, all those things. Instead, I want to go with report option. Report, when we select report, we are getting a blank report file. So this report file I will name it as sales by product. I will call it as with filter because we are going to try to add a filter. So that is my report. So now I got an empty report. So if you look at this one, there is nothing. So there is no table name, no matrix, nothing. Even the data sets, data sources, all are empty because we just created an empty template, report template. So to build a report, the first thing I need to do is set the data set and data source properties, values to the data sources and data sets, so that the report can get the data from the given data set. So I will go ahead and right click on data source, say add data source, and I want to use shared data source for my report. I will go ahead and select this one. If I need to create a new data source that is not in the shared data sources list, I can do it here. But since I am going to use a shared data source, I will say use shared data source and pick the source name. Click OK. Now we added the data source, and now I will go ahead and add a data set. And the data sets, if you look at this one, we have a free flow text. Instead, I want to use a stored procedure. Okay. So, for the stored procedure, I can create a shared data sets here. Add a new data set, because I want to create one shared data set and use it across multiple reports. So, I will say sales by product, that is my data set. I will call it as ds underscore, which represents data set underscore, or I will just leave it as sales by product. And the data source I am going to use is my shared data source, and this is a stored procedure. So, I will select a stored procedure, and I will pick the procedure name, which is my query, or the stored procedure we created, that takes a calendar year as a input parameter. Sales by product. Now, if I go to parameters, I see alternate calendar year as parameter. The value is not yet passed, because the value should be passed in the report. So far we are creating just the shared data set. So, click OK. The item with the name sales by product already exists. Okay. So, it is already there. Okay. So, I will say SP to say this is a SP. Click OK. Now, since I created a shared data set, I will use that data set into my report. Right click on the data sets, add data set, and I will say use shared data set. And here I have two data sets available. I will pick sales by product, and I will name this as sales by product. I will say ds underscore sales by product underscore sp. So, this name, whatever I have given here, is specific to this report. We are not changing the shared data set name. This is data set name is used within this report. And if you go to parameters, again I see calendar year as parameter, but the value is not yet passed. Okay. So, I will say click OK. Now, I created my data set. Now, my next step is to create the filter, where I can load the year numbers and pass the year number to this particular data set. To do that, I will go to parameters. When I expand parameters here, I already see calendar year. That is because this data set is expecting a parameter as at the rate calendar year. So, SSRS created by default one parameter for us. So, I will say right click, parameter properties. So, our intention here is we need to pre-populate this particular parameter with available years. So, to do that, I go to available values, where we can provide predefined values. So, if you look at this, there are two ways. One is specific values, where I can hard code some numbers like 2010, 11, 12, like that, here the values. Or the other option is get the values from a query. That means you run a SQL query and take the output and use the output as values to this particular parameter. So, since I need to get the data from the SQL table, I will be using get values from a query, and I will run a query which gives me the year numbers. So, to do that, even before going here, I will need to add a new data set, because I need to provide the data set in the available list. Right here, I need to provide the data set. So, I will say one of the options I have here is, if I look at my stored procedure, the stored procedure is already giving me calendar year. So, I can directly use the stored procedure to get the years, but that will be performance impact, because we need to run this whole joins. So, instead what I want to do is I want to run a simple query which gives me the years, like select distinct calendar year from dim date order by calendar year. So, I get all the calendar years. Now, I want to make sure this particular years the data exists in the fact table, right. So, the way we need to do is we need to join to fact internet sales and something like this. We need to join to the fact reseller sales and internet sales to get the years that exist in the fact tables. So, for simplicity here I will just say where calendar year between 2010 and 2014, because I know that the fact data has data, or fact tables have data for years 2010 to 2014. So, I will do that. I will take this query. This is just a simple query I have provided. Otherwise, in general, we should be joining to the fact reseller sales and fact internet sales and get the years from the fact table. So, instead of doing a complex query, I am just using a simple query. So, I will take this one, create a new data set, add data set, and my data set is not a shared data set in this case. So, I need to say use a data set embedded in my report. So, that means this particular data set what we are going to create is part of this as a report. Okay. I will call this as SSRS I will say get years, or I will suggest years. Okay. And now the text is my query. Since I am using a plain English text query, I will select text and put the query. Now, the fields, options, these are all, we will just leave it as is, because we do not need to worry about those things. And I have not selected data source one, click OK. So, now we have a second data set that gives just the year numbers. Now, I will go to the parameter, to the properties, and say go to the available values and say get values from a query. Now, I provide the data set. My data set is ds underscore years, and the value I am going to get calendar year, and label is calendar year. So, what are this value and label? Label is the one that is going to show in the drop down for the users to pick, and the value is the corresponding value. So, when is this useful? Let us say in our case we are doing calendar year number will be same as a label or a value. But for example, let us say you are dealing with quarter description where we had Q3 CY 2014 like that, right, which is a descriptive message, or even you can say product, right. If you have product as a filter, you will be showing to the user a product name, whereas when user selects a specific product, you want to use its product key to filter the data. You do not want to take the string and go and filter the tables, which will be more expensive. Instead, if you have the product key corresponding to the selected product name, you can use that key to filter the fact data. So, that is the scenario where we will be using value field. In that case, the label field and value field will be different. But in our case, since the year is same number, either it is a value or label, I will be using, I am using the same column. Now click OK. So now what is happening? We are providing a predefined list through a query. And now I will go to my data set, properties, and here I want to make sure that the parameter I have is passing the value properly. So the parameter name is at calendar year, which is the stored procedure parameter, and the value is the parameter. So this square brackets and at the rate represents the SSRS parameter. Click OK. Now I want to just preview this report. So now I see a predefined list, calendar year and number of years here, 2010, 11, 12, 13, 14. And now user can pick one of the value instead of entering his own number or year number. He can pick the value that is available in the pre-populated list. So that way we can avoid the confusion, and we can ensure that whatever the values user is selecting, we are showing the report. Okay. So that is how we populate the filter. Now we will try to design or build the report. So since we haven't used a wizard, we don't have any report body. So what I want to do is I want to create a simple report using a table type. So what I will do, right click on this pane, report body pane, I will say insert, and I will see bunch of options here. One of the option is table. You see table and matrix. So these are report types, table type or matrix type. So I will pick table type as my report, and as soon as I pick table, I get the structure here. So I will be using product category, or I will say first I will go with quantities, reseller quantity and internet order quantity. So these are my measures. Now I want to group this one. As we talked in previous session, tables or table types allows only row groups. You cannot have column groups. Okay. So for grouping, I need a column to group these values with or group the values by. So first I will pick product category. So I want to group these measures by product category. So I will go ahead and create a row group. So we need to create a row group where we can group the values, group these numbers by a given value, given column. So I will say group, row group, group properties, and group expression. How do I want to group this report? Group on product category name. So I am creating a group, I will name it as product category group, and this is grouping the measures, the numbers by product category name. Click OK, and let us run the report and see. So I will select 2011 view report, which is giving me the data for 2011 and for the product category. So if you look at these numbers doesn't make any sense. It's 110001. This is not actually the totals. That is because we are not aggregating these measures. We are just saying group, but we are not aggregating. Since we are not aggregating, what is happening? We are getting the first row value here for this matrix. This is the first row when we group by product category from the data. That is why we are getting 1 as order quantity, because each order is one line item in the table. So to get a proper aggregation, I want to aggregate these numbers. So to do that, I will set an expression on these columns. My expression would be, right click on this cell and say expression. Here in the expression page we can define any expressions, we can define formula, we can set conditions and anything. So, if you look at the convention, naming convention, earlier we talked at the red brackets, something like this, at the red parameter or calendar year. This we talked about as a parameter. In SSRS, a parameter is represented like this. And fields are nothing but the fields that are coming from the data set, fields that are available in the data set are represented as fields, exclamation, and the cell column name and the value, or field name and the value. Okay. So, now I will just say, I will just provide an aggregation function which is my sum to sum the values. Okay. Click OK. Now, do the same thing for the internet order quantity or internet order quantity. Click OK. Now, save it and I will go to the preview to see the report again. 2011. Now, I see the aggregated value here. Now, what is happening? The resale order quantity under clothing, all the rows under clothing are getting aggregated. Earlier, it was showing only the value of first row under this clothing. Similarly, for components, bikes and all. So, that is about adding a row group. Now, I want to add subcategory as well to a group. So, I want to first group by category and then by subcategory. So, I need to add another row group, okay, because the first row group we defined as grouping at category level. Now, I want to group at subcategory level. So, I will say add row group, and this is going to be child group, because I want to first group by subcategory, then by first group by category and then by subcategory. So, here it is asking which field I want to use to group by. So, I will say product subcategory, click OK. So, I got product category here and product subcategory here. So, I will just need to, I will delete this guy. I will try to recreate. Okay, but anyway, so I will just move it here. Copy paste. Paste. So, I moved these columns, product category first and product subcategory. Now, I will copy the reseller order quantity and the internet order quantity for subcategory as well. That means in the second row group. So, I am first row group is at the product category level, where I am still showing the reseller order quantity and internet order quantity, which is a total value of at product category level. Then I created another row group for subcategory, where I am still again showing the sum of these measures. Now, let us go to the preview and see the report. So, I will select 2011 and view the report. Now, what is happening? The data is getting first grouped by clothing or product category and then by product subcategory. So, I see the values here. So, like this we can create the reports from scratch. So, I can do multiple row groups here. So, parent row group and child row group. So, similarly we can add multiple row groups, and I am not going through all the color changing and fonts all, because those are just easy to do it. Right click and properties, text box properties, and you can change the fonts and border. So, that is how we can create a drop down filter where we can populate the values from the server or from the database, and also we can create the report from scratch.